Hi, my name is Phil. I like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the news that the Brexit negotiations have been formally abandoned for the time being, partly due to obvious reasons and also partly because Boris Johnson has refused to complete his homework on the talks. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the fact that the Brexit talks are not exactly in full swing will come as no surprise to anybody. Not only has the virus been affecting senior members of the negotiating team, potentially on both sides, but the EU have, they at least have more pressing issues to be dealing with. You'd have thought we do as well. However, remote talks were not impossible, even though the fallacy of getting a comprehensive trade deal in 2020 was always pie in the sky even before this emergency. But it's now transpired that the trade talks have been put into what is being reported as a deep freeze. And it's actually largely down to Boris Johnson. So before this current crisis blew up, I was updating with Brexit news basically every day. One common theme was the fact that Boris Johnson was not actually providing any details on the sort of deal that he wanted. Sure, he kept banging on about his Canada-style deal, but that was only to get his supporters to think he had a plan. In reality, a Canada-style deal is extremely complex and you have to come up with a few details. What he needed was an actual written proposal with details as to how such a treaty would work in practice legally. But Johnson never provided this. He said he would, but he didn't. So even if the current crisis were to evaporate overnight, like a miracle, as Donald Trump was saying, it would mean two things. First of all, it would mean that Donald Trump said something would actually happen and then it actually happens. What a scary world that would be. But two, the talk still couldn't go ahead because Boris Johnson hasn't provided the legal text for both sides to begin working on. After all, even though the EU collectively, as well as individual member states, all have their plates full with corona and other issues, the negotiating teams are still assigned to Brexit talks. They could still carry on with that role behind the scenes if necessary in order to make some progress. Yes, if it became time for some executive decisions to be made on the part of individual member states, their governments, and they were too busy with the current crisis, okay, at that point you end up with a bit of a lull. But for now, there's no reason why talks couldn't have been going ahead remotely. But without that text, which, as I say, Johnson promised some time ago, there's nothing to base the talks on, even remotely held talks. So the current situation is that a legal text does exist. It was produced by the EU. They produced their version. But Boris Johnson said, I don't like that, don't want that. So then they said, OK, so where's yours? And there we are. We don't have it. He's just saying he doesn't like this text, but the text apparently he does like doesn't exist, or at least it hasn't been handed over. So now, not only is Michel Barnier infected with the virus, so too is Boris Johnson. Without amending the withdrawal legislation in the UK, an extension to the transition period would have to be agreed by the start of July. So they've got until the end of June, basically. Amending that legislation will be tricky, with Parliament not sitting right now, although you'd hope it will be at some point before the end of the year. But it may not be sitting before that date. So the Prime Minister at the moment is still saying that we are leaving the transition period at the end of this year. He sort of said that last week. Not sure how that'll be politically or economically possible right now, if indeed it ever was. But bear in mind, it's not like it would be the first time Boris Johnson has said a thing and then knowing full well that that thing is not going to happen. And whatever happens to the public mood over the coming months, and surely it's bound to have some view on Brexit, because Brexit is still overshadowing us. Just because we've got this much more pressing and dangerous crisis right now, which is natural, doesn't mean to say Brexit is not overshadowing everything we are still doing. It's unlikely to see growing Brexit support. Quite the contrary, I would have thought. In about a month from now, we're going to be seeing a situation where EU nations are starting to get access to much more medical equipment that we will still be lacking. Consider this, if we hadn't voted for Brexit, there'd have been no discussion about joining the EU's procurement drive that we turned down for medical equipment. We'd have automatically been involved. It wouldn't have suited anyone's political situation to say no. It would have just been automatic. That would have been all there was to it. The Conservatives still wouldn't be supporting the NHS, so on a national level, our health service wouldn't be getting the resources it needs, just as they're not now. But the EU at least would spare some of our blushes and actually come to the rescue a little. And people will have to face up to this. There are even sections of the Conservative Party and the Conservative supporting media right now raging at these brainless political decisions that are going to be costing lives. So by the time we get to summer, I can't imagine how there's going to be much support for exiting the EU into a hard Brexit at all, if there is even now, which I really don't see. So that's where we are now. It is now formally frozen, the Brexit talks there. Boris Johnson has got two choices. He can either extend, which surely he's got to, or he can take us out at the end of this year, and I don't even know how much damage that's going to do to anyone. I can only imagine, but there we are. So that should be it. That should be the last time I need to talk about Brexit until the next time, which I don't anticipate being too soon, but we will see. We'll see. It keeps popping its head up, doesn't it? But I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.